How's everybody doing today? Today we are going to be looking at a video on Excel graphics. Excel makes graphing very easy for you. In a lot of cases, all you need to do is highlight the information that you would like graphed, and then you just select your graph type. This worksheet that I'm working with is called Graphs, and it is available to you in this link for download, so you can download and follow along with the video if you like. In my first graph, what I'd like to do is, this is hotel occupancy, so I'm going to assume that my hotel has general people, business people, and then convention people who are just here for a convention. I would like to graph the first 6 months of this information. So I'm just going to highlight the first 6 months. I don't want the total to appear in the graph, so I didn't include it in my highlight. I go over here to Insert. I do want to try a column chart. So I hit column chart. I'm going to make this thing just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to move it over here so I can get a look at it. What you can see is, for the most part, it did what I wanted it to do. It realized that general, business, and convention are my legends. It realized that I wanted January through June as my x-axis titles. So it was pretty much on target. The wizard in this case did just what I wanted to. The one thing I might change here is I might go up here and click, and I could change chart title to hotel guests if I wanted to. Alright, so I make that change and I say, well, you know what, this graph, it's ready to go. I'm happy with it, so I can either move it out of the way, or I could put it somewhere else. In this case, I'm just going to delete it because I don't want it anymore. The next one I'm going to show you is a pie graph. Typically for a pie graph, you have two ranges of information. One is text and one is numeric. I would like, in this case, to graph January through June, my total number of guests. So I go to highlight January through June. Now I've got a little issue here. Some of you might not know this. I want to highlight a discontinuous block, but if I just go over here now and try to highlight the the numbers, it takes it off one and it puts it onto the other. What you need to do is you need to use your control key. So if I want to highlight a block of data over here, and then I want a different one over here, I can just hold down my control key, kick and drag, and then I'll have it. Alright, so now I got both blocks highlighted. What I'm going to do now is going to go to Insert. I'm going to go to Chart, but this time I want a pie chart. So I click on it, and here it is. I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller and move it over a little bit. So again, these are my legends. These are the items that allow me to differentiate my pieces of pie by color. I decide I don't really like them here. I want to put them over here. One thing you can do once you've got your chart up, you can go to Chart Element, my icon up here, and I get to change a lot of things. My legends, I'm going to go down here. I could say I don't want any. I could say I want these to the right or the top or the bottom. I actually want mine to the right, so I'm going to click right so they stay on the right. The other thing I like to have on a pie chart is I really like to have data labels. Now if I go back up here to my chart element, I can go to data labels, and I can say, alright, where do I want them? Inside end, outside end, center, best fit. Best fit is actually pretty nice, and in most cases it works out for you. Another thing I just wanted to show you that's kind of neat is, if you want to, instead of having numbers here for your data labels, you can turn those into percents. So I'm going to go back to data labels, but I'm going to go down to more data label options, and I'm going to say I would like a percentage here instead of a value. And I'm done with this window now, so I'm going to close it, and now I see I've got a percentage. So that's kind of nice. I'm pretty much done with this chart. Again, I might change the title on it, but besides that, I'm pretty much done with it. What I wanted to do is go over to the next sheet, the Burton sheet, and try some graphs that are a little bit more challenging, in the respect that I've got to be a little bit more savvy in what I highlight. In my hotel worksheet, my data was pretty much sequential, no skipped rows, no skipped columns, so it was pretty simple. Here, my data is a little bit more spaced out. What I want to graph for my first graph in this worksheet is I'd like to graph total sales, cost of goods sold, and gross profit. So what I'm going to do initially is just highlight those 3 lines. Alright, I highlight these 3 lines and I say, alright, I'm going to go to insert. I also want to do another column chart. So I select column chart, and I've definitely got some issues here. It did figure out some stuff. It did figure out that I want total sales, cost of goods sold, and gross profit. But it's got a big gap here. It doesn't know what I want for my x-axis titles. So I need some way to fix this. A lot of this is how you highlight. The next highlight I'm going to do, I'm going to highlight the exact same thing, but I'm actually going to delete this graph. I'm going to skip the B column. Alright, so I did the same highlight, but notice I skipped over these 3 cells. So now I'm going to go up to Insert. I'm going to try my column chart, and now it's getting pretty close. Pretty much it figured out the bars I want: total sales, cost of goods sold, gross profit. It still doesn't know what I want to do for my x-axis title. It doesn't know that I want months up here. So I'm going to go actually beyond what the wizard does for me and show you one thing that'll allow you to do this. If you ever want to change any of the numeric data that is included in your graph right now, what you can do is go to Select Data. If you go to Select Data, it'll tell you what you've got now for total sales, cost of goods sold, gross profit, and your horizontal axis labels. Now, my horizontal axis labels are what I want to change. I don't want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. So I click on Edit, and basically what it does is it lets me just click and drag to select the cells that I want included, and then I can hit OK. And then I hit OK to accept that, and I'm pretty much all set now. It fixed it up for me. A couple other things I can do if I want to this graph. I could say, alright, I could go in here. I could do my data labels again if I wanted them. They're not quite as useful on a bar graph, or if this is a column graph, because they make it a little bit too busy. So I usually don't like them. I could change my chart title. I did want to talk a little bit about grid lines. By default, it gives you minor grid lines, which are these ones up here. If for some reason you wanted vertical grid lines, you could add those, or major horizontal is just going to put more of them in there. For now, though, I pretty much like this graph the way it is, so I'm going to leave it. But remember, when you graph, part of it initially is just being very savvy and only including what you want in the graph, only including that in the highlighting. If you do that and you play around a little bit and then you work inside the wizard, remember, you can always go here to change the data that you've selected. You can usually make out pretty good. The next graph that I want to do with you is a math graph. So I'm going to go to this area. Right now this is pretty much blank. When you do a math graph, you are going to have to graph it over a certain range. Usually it's good to select a range like -5 to +5, so you get some areas in the negative quadrant of the graph as well as the positive. So the range, I'm just going to go -5, -4. Remember from the copying video, once I do that, I can copy and paste this sequence, and then it fills in the data for me. So in a graph, if it's a math graph, sometimes I'll just give you the range. I'll say I'd like this graph -5 to 5. Maybe if I wanted it -10 to +10, you could just have this a little bigger. And then over here, you just do the graph that you want. Now, let's say I wanted to do the graph of a line. A line graph might be y equals 2x plus 3. That's the graph of a line. So I say, alright, 2x plus 3, if I take 2 times -10, excuse me, negative 5, it's negative 10, plus 3 is negative 7. So I could start to figure all this out in my head and put it down here. Or a much smarter way is I could say, well, where is the value for x? It's in A3. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a formula here. I'm going to put equal sign A3 times 2 plus 3. So pretty much if I was doing the graph y equals 2x plus 3, assuming x is in cell A3, I'm multiplying it by 2 and I'm adding 3. So that will be the graph of that line. So I'm going to copy this formula, and now I'm ready to go. So I say, okay, now I want to graph this line. I highlight both columns of data. I go to Insert. Now, it's a little bit counterintuitive. You might think, well, this is a line graph, so I would like to do a line type of graph. That's not true. If it's a math graph, whether it's a line or a curve, you always want to use an XY scatter. I like to use the one that has not only the points, but also the line itself. So I do that. And here it is. Here is my line. Now, if you were to in a math class and they asked you to graph this and you went out and you got a piece of graph paper, it wouldn't look much different than that. Usually for the chart title, I put what I'm going to graph, what it is. So I did put that there. I put y equals 2x plus 3. So here's my graph. So if you're in a math class and you're asked to do graphics, and well, if they don't mind if you do them in Excel instead of on paper, you can do this. The nice thing that I like so much about this is once you get your range set up, you can pretty much graph anything. Let's say I wanted to see what does the graph y equals x squared look like. Alright, so I can say, well, all I have to do is change my equation. Y equals x squared. Again, if x is in cell A3, I just need to take A3 to the second power, copy that down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Alright, I put in this formula equal sign A3 raised to the second power. I just copy that formula down, and now I have a graph for a different mathematical equation. This one would be y equals x raised to the second power. You can get as complex with these math graphs as you want. I mean, if you wanted to see, you know, what does this one look like? Let's say, for example, you wanted to see, well, what does this graph look like? Y equals 5x raised to the third plus 7x raised to the second power minus 14. Well, it looks like a real nasty complex equation, but all you have to do is type it in here. Again, I know my x is in cell A3, so every time I see x, I just substitute A3, and I'm good to go. Alright, I put in my formula 5 times A3 raised to the third power plus 7 times A3 raised to the second power minus 14. Pretty much mirrors this one down here. Here's my equation. I copy it down, and here's what that graph looks like. So math graphs in Excel are extremely easy, really. You just select a range, and it can be any range. Like I said, usually I like to start with a negative and go up to a positive, but if you wanted this to be negative 10 through positive 10, you could do that. And then whatever formula you're asked to graph, it's pretty easy to just substitute in Excel. So wherever the x would be, you substitute where you're pulling the x from, and you can pretty much make any graph, any math graph you'd like to make. So like I say, if you have a math class and it's an option for you, if they don't mind you doing it, consider doing it in Excel. It does all kinds of stuff for you. Anyhow, hopefully this was helpful. There's going to be one other short video in this series which just explains exactly what I'm looking for your homework, but hopefully this was helpful, getting you on on the road to Excel graphics. Thanks. Have a good day. We'll see you next time.